All right, welcome everyone. We're back for another data engineering meetup. This one, it was going to be an in-person event in Melbourne, but we just still had a few restrictions at the office that we were going to host it at. And looks like there was a few cases, unfortunately, today. So I think it made a lot of sense to do this one online. We've got two really awesome and experienced speakers tonight. Both doing talks from using, I guess, the Azure cloud, doing data engineering on the Azure cloud. Um, we've got Benny Austin, who's a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft. He's doing a bunch of consulting before then, but yeah, he's going to take us through unified data governance using Azure Purview, which is, I guess, yeah, their sort of data lineage and governance tool, which sounds really cool. It's based off Apache Atlas. So that's going to be our second talk of the night. Our first talk is from Maayan Dermer. He's head of data and analytics and BI at Cleanaway Waste. Um, he's got many years of IT experience, and I think he's got some really cool sort of fun history of doing some cool projects in IT. So I think we've got a lot to learn tonight. And his title of his talk is "Garbage In, Data Out." Turning Cleanaway into the Uber of garbage. So that sounds fascinating. So without further ado, I'm going to add Mayan to the stream. Welcome to the online Melbourne Data Engineering Meetup, Mayan. Thanks for joining us. How's it all going?
Hey Peter, how you going? Everything's all right, lockdown and stuff. Hopefully we could go back to the office at some point. It's a challenging time, especially if you want to build teams.
Yes, can imagine, team communication and cohesion and stuff like that. It must be quite, I'm sure you've got a lot of insights to share with us on that topic, but you've got a different topic to take us through tonight. So I'm really fascinated by it. I'm sure that Cleanaway must produce a tremendous amount of really good data, and it'll be fascinating to hear, what you're doing with it. So without further ado, take it away, Mayan.
Sounds good. So as Peter presented, and I think that's actually a really good intro. I think as data engineers, software engineers, we've all heard the expression "garbage in, garbage out." In Cleanaway, the data analytics, if you call it motto, is "garbage in, data out." Garbage, if you kind of think about it, it's something that I would say most people would completely ignore, or you just put something on the bin and it magically disappears. I would say, the same boat as well. After working in Cleanaway for the last year and a half, I have a completely different view on this whole topic, and just going to take you to behind the scene and how it reflects on data. And I hope that after this presentation you would be excited as garbage, at least as myself. So we're going to have a bit of the agenda. What we're going to talk about today is a bit intro on Cleanaway, challenges that we had, technical challenges and business challenge that creating for us data practitioners interesting problems to solve. Our data journey, why garbage is exciting. We're going to talk about a bit our data governance strategy. I'll discuss in an interesting use case that could only be properly resolved using BI/data analytics, and in the future advanced analytics. And we're going to talk about our roadmap. So I'm actually going to start with just a quick intro about myself. I started my IT or data career at the age of, I would say, 14. I was in high school, and I actually sold a piece of software to a business that was fixing home appliances, white appliances. And I sold them the computer. I built a small software for them in Access, MS Access, if you remember back in the day. I think it's actually being used. And that was all like just the beginning. Wrote a lot of software. I joined the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, at the age of 17 and a half. I was there for 8 and 9 years. And I would say that I learned most of what I know from working there. Since then, I managed to work in a lot of other places. Overall, I think I have around 20 years of experience. I worked on many industries, on the first generation, I would say, of BI and data warehouse solutions, first version of Informatica, IoT before it was branded like that, big data, HR data marts, this is all like where I started, and I still have a really nice warm color in my heart for it. And we'll talk about that and how it relates to production lines, surprisingly. Other interesting industry that I worked with were traffic, fleet management, aerospace in IAI, Israel Aerospace Industries, and Boeing, medical devices, services, gaming, PointsBet, if you heard of them. And back in 2016, the company was 6 people. Now it's ASX, I think, 200, $2.5 billion company. Amazing journey that we've done there. And for me personally, to set over there all of their data engineering, BI, analytics infrastructure from scratch, also on Azure, was quite an amazing experience. I joined Cleanaway in February 2020, just before COVID hit. I'm going to talk about it a bit in the slide. That was one heck of a journey. And I'll start with, again, something a bit more from my background. From my perspective, everything is IoT. I like to kite surf, and everything is data. Everything is some kind of, I would say, monitoring, or if you would like, even the ability to predict stuff. So I didn't want to go to the beach to kite surf, so I just bought a really cheap weather station, reverse engineered their protocol using AWS, connected it to the cloud, and what you can see here is basically telemetry data of the wind plus camera, and how I can just look at it from home and decide if I want to go or not. Why do I tell you all of that plus those industries? Because surprisingly, garbage is actually, I would say, utilizing everything that I've been exposed to in my life when I was working in all the different industry. Every single thing. Cleanaway is a huge company. And I'm actually going to be a bit of shameless, and I'm going to tell you something that is not publicly on LinkedIn and Seek. We're going to have ads coming up in the next couple of days. We're actually significantly expanding the team. The positions here that I listed are going to be advertised in the next couple of days. Feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn if you want to apply for any of those positions. The senior data scientist position would be the first, and as of now, the only data scientist in Cleanaway, after we managed to set up a lot of the infrastructure to actually start building amazing things. So feel free to reach out to me. So let's talk about Cleanaway. Cleanaway, it's quite a big, iconic Australian brand. We have over 6,000 employees, thousands of vehicles, hundreds of sites, facilities. You can see on the slide, it's quite a remarkable business, and it's a ASX 100 company. It's one of the biggest companies in Australia. It's been around since 1975, if I'm not mistaken, something like that, but before I was born. And we do waste management. What does waste management means? Once you put stuff in your bin, it disappears. What happens after that? This is where Cleanaway jumps in. If I compare Cleanaway to all the other industries that I worked in, everyone, especially even if you look at Azure Stack or AWS, everyone's saying IoT, it's cool, like people want to work on it. Like, we actually do IoT for real. We have we have scales on our trucks. We have weight bridges. We have SCADAs, basically our production line for sorting facilities, incinerators. Every time the truck moves, every 2 minutes, ping, there is a GPS. It's quite amazing, the wealth of data from different sources, not structured. It's not even big data. It's huge. And I compare it to other places that I worked. just the variety, the velocity that it's coming, the amount of transaction, and the fact that Cleanaway is a national business, it's quite amazing. We have over 100 source systems that we're reading data from: financial, transaction systems, IoT, scheduling, like just you name it, HR, like it doesn't stop. And the company keeps growing with more needs, with more requirements. So you just have to continue basically chase everything. Cleanaway has a vertical integration, and vertical integration in the waste management is quite powerful, and it allows you to do stuff that usually you cannot do from data and software engineering and data science in other companies. What it means that we control everything from the moment that you put the waste in the bin to the moment that it goes to landfill or to recycle, which trucks picks it up, like where does it go, even the bin itself. When we deliver it to a customer, the customer is actually renting it from us. So the fact that you can control every piece of the chain of the waste life cycle is quite amazing. Cleanaway's data journey started, I would say, a year and a half ago. I joined Cleanaway to start building all of our data and analytics function and capabilities, and we are reporting to the business. What does it mean, the business? We're not reporting to IT. We're working really closely with a bunch of very talented people over there, but we're actually sitting under the CFO. It's really, I would say, good at the beginning of the data journey to get direct sponsorship from the government, from the senior leadership of the company. It also puts you under a magnifier with everything that you do, but that's a different story. So if we're looking at what are the challenges that we have in Cleanaway, Cleanaway got to its size a lot by muscle. What does it mean? That it bought a lot of company acquisitions. When you buy another business, you also get their IT, their data. You have to start consolidating all your data assets, all your data point, in order to create unified picture for the senior leadership. We have, I would say, unfortunately, at any given point, multiple ERP systems, and we're all the time consolidating them. The thing is, every time that you buy another company, you had another system. Oh, we need to consolidate that, etc., etc. What it means that you also sometimes inherit the quality of the data and all the business processes of the company that you just purchased. Could be good, could be bad. The quality of the data is different from place to place. Cleanaway is a low-tech business. What does it mean? That the product that we sell is not an app on your phone. It's a service, a very low-tech service, brick and mortar. And we started our data journey just before COVID hit. It was a very interesting one. I wouldn't say that it was easy. It was really hard. And the fact that it started from a place that we didn't have any kind of single function person that owns all of our data, responsible for the quality, how it's being used, and our data governance made things extremely hard. Another thing is aggregator customers. So if you look, for example, at a company like Spotless or Donner, which there are our customer, they're actually servicing other customers. So when you want to measure stuff, what exactly do you want to measure? How do you want to measure it? The definition of everything that we do is quite important. The second thing that is also got to do with our customer, that from our perspective, that's the main focus of everything that we should do, is an interesting situation that you end up with a customer that the customer is also a competitor and a supplier. What I mean by that, so let's look at, for example, JJ Richards or VC, one of our competitors. If they're going to sign a contract and they don't have good coverage to service a client in a certain place, they're actually going to ask us to subcontract for them if we have coverage. So they are, in this case, our customer. They're a competitor because obviously we compete for the same market. And they could be our supplier if, for example, I would like to dispose a waste in their facilities because it's closer to my truck as of now. So the complex of the problems that we need to solve in order to get to very high efficiency, it's quite unique. The last thing is Cleanaway sometimes it has multiple waste streams, liquid waste services, solid waste services, etc., etc. And they operate sometimes like completely different businesses under the same umbrella. When they operate like that, the top management still would like to see it on a unified way, and it makes our life as data practitioner very interesting. Even just creating the definitions, a lot of the time we feel that certain processes that should come from the business ended up coming from us because we cannot actually achieve what the senior leadership wants us to do. So we actually from bottom up align how the business behaves so we could present the data the right way. From technical challenges in Cleanaway, data quality, I would say that's probably the biggest one. There is a lot of manual ETL, ELT that is happening, a lot of humans in the loop. There is no standardization, sometimes different unit of measurements everywhere. And again, it all boils down to the fact that you buying another company, sometimes using multiple source system. Now imagine trying to reconcile all your transaction to your ledger and then to your P&L when it's sitting on million different systems. You want to be able to drill down. It's sometimes easier said than done. The thing that we discovered that worked really well, that everything should be bottom up, because the data quality was an issue. People said, the data cannot be trusted. Only if people believe you that that's a source of truth, and you build everything bottom up, so people could basically drill into a number and see all the transactions that comprise that number, only then the data could be trusted. And we have to remember that trust is a one-time gift. We saw a lot of situations when actually people use the source systems as mini data warehouse because they didn't have any kind of even place to just transform the data. So you ended up with a lot of analytics layers that are living between, that are basically living in a couple of places, but have different data sets. Limited accessibility to historical data because the data governance was not in place. When you are trying to give people the ability to look at the past, if you don't design it the right way and you just a bit hack everything together, you just don't get history. And again, why do we do all this work? I would say from two main reasons. One of them to give the business visibility on past and present, and the next step is obviously to be able to look at the future. When I'm saying to look at the future, is basically supporting advanced analytics work and lay the foundations for increased profitability in our business. Basically, help data scientists not be data engineers. If I'm trying to basically to sum up the challenges that we have, this is really a good example of different analytics layer that's sitting on different source systems, and how four different business or data analysts would extract the same data, because they're going to do the transformation locally on their machine using whatever tool they want. They're going to end up with 4 different insights, and everything is broken on the stack. Our current stack, which based on Azure, is much more modern, by-the-book stack with a modern data lake, MPP-based EDW, and we're using Power BI as our reporting layer. That way, we could actually ingest all different kinds of source systems, standardize the data, clean it, transform it, fuse it, etc., etc. I guess I'm not reinventing the wheel here by showing this type of stack. Specifically in Azure, it's actually quite common. I'm a big advocate of, I call it second generation technology. You have to, especially if you're looking at a company like Cleanaway, pick something that you know that it's working. Yeah, it's not going to be the best thing of the market, like the latest technology, but it is solid and it's working, and you can build foundation for an ASX 100 company for that, and not take a risk of accidentally going into an adventure that you don't know how you're going to end up with. So from data governance strategy, if we talked about the fact that we have 6 different, I would say, businesses in Cleanaway: solids waste services, liquid waste services, the health services that we have, hydrocarbon, plastics, and industrial waste services. Every state or territories would actually have to access the data and only their data. So if I am if I am a business analyst in Victoria or a CBP, commercial business partner, I'm only supposed to see the data that I'm supposed to be exposed to in the solids waste services. Same thing for Queensland or liquids waste services. If, for example, the group lead of all the solids across the whole business wants to see the data, they're supposed to see all the data. Using RLS on our EDW is actually the right solution, and this is part of the data governance strategy that we did. We're using Azure Synapse to do that. I would say that we're pretty happy with the product. There are a couple of things that we haven't managed to do, and we're waiting for Microsoft to complete the development on those. But this is a really good example how you have to pick the right technology in a way that will be connected to the way that you run your business. You're not supposed to be able to. You're not supposed to let people see other sides of the business if they're not supposed to. For example, liquids, solids, etc., etc. On the other hand, you don't want to generate the same data or to maintain million different containers or a mini data lake. It turns into a swamp, or having multiple copies of the data just because you cannot look at the same data with different lenses. And obviously, if you want to look at group KPI, or let's assume like credits to customers in the whole group. Why garbage is exciting? Let's talk about problems for us as data engineers. Let's assume now that I'm just putting my waste in the bin. It's gone, right? It's magically gone. No, it didn't. Cleanaway, what it does basically, we collect the bin, we put it in a truck. The truck goes and collects a lot of other bins. Then the truck goes and disposes from the garbage somewhere, and then it goes back to its depot. And then inside the recycle center, for example, or the landfill, it's being processed more. If you actually want to make your business very efficient, it's a very complex problem to solve. And I'll explain. The garbage industry is basically a reverse delivery problem. What I mean by that, the truck leaves the depot in the morning empty. It gets filled during the day. You have to dispose it, and then you go and you pick up more stuff. In order to be extremely efficient, or even just like very efficient, you have to calculate all those things together. What I mean by that, if, for example, I'm now going to pick up the same bin 100 times, I'll know on average how heavy, what's the density of the bin that would be. If I'm going to pick up all the bins in the neighborhood 100 times, I could average more or less like how full every bin would be. Again, it's all average, and then I could actually do my route optimization better. I could decide when I'm going to go and dispose of my garbage. For example, if the truck leaves the depot at 3 a.m. and I would like to say, the truck is going to get filled in a certain hour, I'm probably going to make sure that it's not going to get filled at 9 a.m. during rush hour when I need now to go to a disposal depot and dispose of it. You see how it's starting to be extremely complex? Let's look on another situation. I mentioned at the beginning HR and production lines and truck and garbage. Let's assume that I had a route, and the truck finished the route, and now the driver finishes her shift, and you have 2 more bins to pick up. I could either tell the truck driver, okay, go back to the disposal center because you finished your shift, or I could pay that person overtime. What is the best decision? What is worth for me to do? If I'm very smart, I could say, wait a minute, it's those 2 bins, the truck is not empty. I could go and I could fill those bins, and I'm not supposed to actually pay the driver overtime, for example, versus, wait a minute, the truck is completely full. Go to the disposal center, go back, pick up the bins, and then go back to the depot, and the driver is now working like 4 hours overtime, which is, first of all, sometimes not nice. The second thing, it's not the best sometimes cost path for the business. Another interesting thing is, for example, production line. Let's assume that I have incinerators or, I don't know, just like processing plant, and I now want to process garbage. I could actually connect to, using API to my energy supplier and see the rates, and I could decide if I actually want to have the people working overnight because the cost of electricity are cheaper, or do I want them to continue during the day when maybe I pay them less because they're not night workers, but the prices of electricity are are cheaper. Another thing could be you connect your HR system to your SCADA bus and see what type of employees may be creating failures, MTBDF, mean time between failures of production lines, for example. You might be able to realize, oh, wow, all those people that didn't have that specific training ended up with more malfunctions in our processing plant, for example. Only by doing, I would say, classic data engineering and fusing all those data sources, you could get to those very complex insights and run your business in a very efficient manner. From our data governance strategy, again, I would say pretty classic data journey that worked in the past. Data Lake, we're using Azure ADLS Gen 2. Very happy with it. As our EDW that the user can self-serve using Power BI, we're using Synapse with MPP, basically massive parallel processing. From the way that the business itself is working, it's very distributed. Every BU, business unit, sometimes have a lot of independence. You have to make sure that you're not making them feel like you're replacing them, you're empowering them. Don't find them. Again, remember, they know their business better than you, and you have to empower them. Two other things that were one of the first foundations that we put, and I personally very keen to hear Benny's talk right after me, is our data dictionary. When users don't feel in the void, don't feel alone, they know what every data point means from lineage point of view. And our report catalog of, even if you don't have access to a report or data, at least you know what's there and who to ask. It makes you understand what's around you. It makes you be aware of what are the capabilities, I would say, of the stack, of the data analytics team, of the company, etc., etc. If I'm looking a bit under the hood, just from a technical point of view, this is a very crude diagram of our architecture. The data analytics is extremely modern. All of it is based on Azure. We're using Databricks, Synapse, Azure Event Hub, Stream Analytics, Azure Data Factory for a lot of the orchestration and data movements. And Power BI is our representation and visualization layer. You can write on it on Python. You can do a million things. Microsoft put a lot of effort on Power BI. It's the leading tool on the market, and I personally worked with Tableau, Cognos ReportNet, BO back in the day, MicroStrategy. It's pretty happy with it. Most of our source systems are actually on-prem, and we're using Azure Data Factory Integration Runtime Engine to push the data into the cloud, and from there we're doing all the standard processing. And we also get data. Most of our IoT data is coming from the internet, and we're using the Azure Event Hub to collect it, package it, and then dump it into the data lake. The velocity of the data in the whole stack is very different. For example, a transaction, when you pick up a bin, it's event that happens to a truck, let's say like 80 times a day. But when you get the GPS reading, it's quite frequent. When you look at financial transaction, like end of day, end of month reconciliation, etc., you get different things. One of the interesting things that we noticed, mostly around the GPS and IoT that worked for us, I call it batch streaming, is the data gets on stream all the time, but most of the time you don't actually have to process it. Sometimes it's easier to just process it on batches from cost point of view and complexity and ability to debug. That actually worked quite well for us. And again, it's good on implementations that are not time-based critical. For example, I would not use it for embedded analytics for scheduling, for example. For retro analysis, this is a good one. Another thing, I personally grew up from a place of pure software engineering, and CI/CD and repeatability. This is one of the most important things. And every place that I personally go to, I try to make sure that we are CI/CDing everything. Why? It creates reliability. It's maintainable. It's easier to productionize stuff, and then people trust what you build. all the other I would say standard development practices of SDLC environments. And once you follow all those things, productionization of models becomes a bit easier, and sometimes easier said than done. And again, all depends on the use case. Let's talk about a sale. Let's assume now that someone is want to register for service. Please come and pick up my bin. You see here, and again, this is just mock data for this demo. I blurred some of the things here just because it's name of customers, but the numbers are not right. The waste disposal and the revenue that we might have from different sites might vary a lot. So for example, you see here, this is $65,000 over, let's say, just making it up, it's mock data, over a year. You see that this disposal cost was $15,000 versus the first line, which is $120,000, and the disposal was always half. This is quarter versus half. It means that your gross profit is the same, but you worked here much harder. Why is that happening? And this is one of the things that we're focusing on a lot, on bin profitability. Not every sale is a good sale. In most places that I work, you have the classic triangle of marketing, sales, and operations. Marketing bring a lot of leads to sales. Sales are saying that the leads that marketing are bringing are not good. They sign them on deals, and then operations are saying, oh, sales are making deals that are not profitable for the business. And it's in a lot of places like that. What data analytics and good data engineering bring is clarity to this whole process when you're looking at bin profitability. There are a lot of things that affect on if a bin is profitable or not. For example, let's assume that now I have a bin that is being used by a garage, a place that services cars. You realize that, oh, they signed to have the bin at like certain capacity or certain density of how much it weighs, and they're actually overfilling it every time. So you might be losing money for that, and you might want to change the contract that you have with the customer, or charge with them like a waste plus fee or something like that. Another thing could be the type of account that that we have. It's national account or customer. You'll get different rates from them. The other thing is the location of the bin. A bin that is located in St. Kilda is much easier to service than a bin that is located in Leongatha, like, I don't know, somewhere in the country. Now, this is where it becomes very interesting. Weather. The weather affects on how profitable a bin or not. Why? I'll give you an example. Let's assume now that I have a truck that is a front lift truck, and it's picking up cardboard for recycling. Let's assume that, like today, it was a very rainy day. It means that the cardboard is probably weighing 2 times more than it should. It means that my truck is going to get filled twice the time than it would fill usually if it would pick up the bin on a dry day. Maybe I could create some kind of logic that would alert my sales representative or customer service and tell the customer, look, I'm going to come and I'm going to pick up the bin a day earlier. I'm going to give you 5% discount or 10% discount. But for me, from cost disposal and how fast the truck gets full, it's a life changer. Another thing is just traffic on the roads. If you have rush hour school times, like you're usually going to try not to service bins around schools around 9 o'clock, for example. Cost of labor, overtime, not overtime. What type of people could run what type of service? How and where we dispose the waste. For example, if I'm going to dispose it in one of Cleanaway's sites, it's going to cost me less if I'm going to go to my competitor to dispose of the waste. But maybe I finish the route in a place that is 1 kilometer from my competitor's landfill, and my nearest landfill is 25 kilometers. Interesting. And the most important thing is that everything is on constant change. Customers are coming up and leaving us. They don't even us only coming up. The route changes. Everything is on constant flux, and you have to have a system that is living and breathing. Only by actually taking data from all of those places. Yes, the weather, traffic from Google, our transaction system, GPS, like all those tens, maybe over 100 data sources, you can actually snipe and make sure that every bin is profitable. And if not, we could tell you what you need to do in order to make this bin profitable. The vision of where we would like to be is a hybrid solution that we have scheduled services and people that could book on demand, and it would have minimal impact on our business. My one slide before last is our roadmap and where we're heading next. So we talked about the bin profitability on the previous slide, what effects on that, and how data engineering is playing a pivotal role in making it. You can actually, this is the foundation of everything. The next thing is to build more, I would say, classic data science and other models to calculate churn, recommendation engine. Let's assume that I have a new Chinese restaurant located in I don't know, like in Frankston, and I see that the customer called me and they asked, I just want one general waste bin. I could tell that customer, wait a minute, I see that your restaurant X, blah, 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 and could offer you a package, a bundle of grease trap and a recycle services as well. Personalized pricing. Not every area would be profitable as other areas. So ideally, you could actually tailor price to a specific customer. Now, let's assume that I want to open a new landfill. Where do I open it? What equipment to use? The fact that we have vertical integration allows us to make those decisions. We could move things around. And last and not least is the regulation in the basically in the environment around us keep changing all the time. If it's China that stopped accepting everyone's rubbish 2 years ago, local changes in the state, maybe in the whole country, and the ability that all of us as a society is starting to look at garbage as a resource in order to make our future sustainable. I'm going to finish with my shameless slide of we're hiring. We have, as of now, 7 positions that are open. It's not public yet. It's just because of end of financial year decision that we made as a company to invest a lot in our data analytics and a lot of really good wins that the team did last year that made us get to that point. The data journey that Cleanaway is embarking now, it's quite amazing. From my perspective, personally, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to do it in a 6100 company with a modern software stack in a project that is almost greenfield and have a huge impact on all of our future. Garbage is data. That's it. I hope I was all right with time, Peter.
Perfect.
I hope you enjoyed the talk.
I think that was a virtual round of applause to Maayan. That was a really fascinating talk. Interesting to see kind of, the journey that you've been on as well, because I think, oftentimes, we come into those sorts of roles where, everyone's at all of the different source systems. Well, you often see it in startups, definitely is the case where, everyone's sort of getting at the source systems, and it's probably a suboptimal way to get at all the data. And it's, also congrats to you with all those roles on offer. I think it's, testament to all the awesome work that you've been doing there at Cleanaway Waste. But I think in general, it was just fascinating to learn a bit more about our waste. I think we're all becoming a bit more environmentally conscious with, all the global warming stuff going on and stuff like that. And it's really important to, I guess, understand the full life cycle of, all the things that we consume and where it goes in the end, and that there's a cost there. Can I ask, is it just like commercial waste that you're dealing with, say restaurants and things like that? Or do you also do, home waste?
Everything. So sometimes it's quite a lot. We are being subcontracted by consuls to clear all the waste for your home. For example, next to, it's kind of funny, the truck that collects the waste from my house is a Cleanaway truck that does the recycling. So when we're actually setting all the GPS, I use it to debug because I knew they're coming every day on Tuesday at 6 a.m. So
Right.
we collect everything. We have medical waste services, hard waste like a hard rubbish collection, liquid, hard recovered, plastic, industrial waste services. Those like big tubs, metal tubs, roll in, roll out. All kind of waste that you could imagine. All the yellow bins that we all see now during COVID-19 around the hospitals with Daniel's Health. That's us in all the bathrooms that you see sometimes. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like your business, so your company has a huge reach, and so it's really fascinating because it's not something that you typically think of in your day to day life about what happens with waste and who's actually responsible and where does it end up and the costs associated with it. So that's interesting, fascinating. In fact, Marta, all the way from Berlin, she was a speaker at DataEng Bytes last year. I will be mentioning DataEng Bytes just after we put a few questions to Benny. Mayan. Marta asked, as you move towards Uber for garbage, do you think you'll need to turn to streaming beyond your current stream to batch approach at some point?
So maybe I've butchered all the work that we've done during the talk. We are doing streaming um, for a lot of our uses of advanced analytics. Doing the batch streaming is good enough, and yes, once you actually start doing on the fly scheduling and rerouting, you have to use embedded analytics to do it the right way. Again, it's almost like the traveling agent problem. You'll never be 100% efficient. You pay with optimization, but yes, 100% Martha. This is what we're aiming for. We're laying all the foundation for that, and
Yeah,
we're getting
awesome.
there.
And are you kind of splitting it out? Are you kind of saying, well, I'm streaming to batch because, it's for decisioning and things like, or like, it's for analytical purposes, business decision making, and then I guess a separate workload for when you need to sort of
Yeah,
input.
you basically split the queue into two according to your needs. And again, it really depends on the use case and like how fast you need to react, etc., etc. Usually, when you have to schedule and to have to reschedule an existing route, it comes with a price. You lose efficiency, and that's all right.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, also, Marta mentioned that was a fascinating talk. So thanks so much. Yeah. One other question I had from me, like you mentioned that in your architecture slide, I'm a sucker for those. Like you've got Azure Data Factory and stuff like that. Uh, and obviously Azure Data Factory is a modern tool. In years gone by, some of these tools were like more of a point and click style, but I saw you had a Git arrow to Azure Data Factory and a few other bits and pieces. Are you sort of doing your sort of data pipelines and data processing, um, you know, following DevOps practices, with Git flow and the like, and how's your
One
experience
hundred
with
percent.
that?
100%. Everything is CI/CD. Like today, we had a deployment. Everything is we're using Azure DevOps. We
Yep.
have releases. Everything is traceable. Even the Azure Data Factory, what you call it, just like point and click. Behind it, you could just see a JSON that you could parse it, and this is how you do version control of that. The it's kind of interesting how Azure solved this problem, because coming from a place that I worked with Informatica and Talent in the past, that it's much harder to see changes between even branches or between commits. When you're looking at Azure Data Factory, it's a bit easier. So we have actually a couple of repo for Databricks, for basically EDW, for our Power BI, for our ADF, and when we deploy, everything is being deployed on sync.
Yeah, awesome.
So yeah, everything CI/CD. We CI/CD the hell of everything.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, doesn't matter what cloud you're on, as long as you're DevOpsing it all, and you got your nice CI/CD pipelines. Good on
Yeah,
you.
man.
A plus.
Yeah,
Well
every place
done.
that you come, make sure that Gravity is working. Just
Yeah.
take an apple, drop it. That's it, and start from there.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to quickly share my screen and talk a little bit about DataEng Bytes real quick, Mayan, which
Thank
is
you,
a
Peter.
fantastic conference. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. So real quickly before we dive into our second talk on from Benny from Microsoft about Azure Purview, the data lineage and tool, I was just going to quickly talk to you about DataEng Bytes. We've moved the date. It's happening on the 5th and 6th of October. There's a little bit too much of a commotion happening with COVID right now. And, you know, we won't get into the details of how that's playing out. But we're really committed to having a really awesome in-person conference this year. We've got lots of fallback options. You know, we can totally host the whole thing online, but let's face it, we all want to sort of get together in person and you know, have a chat. So I think it'll be really awesome. Super early bird tickets are finishing on this Sunday, and then they're going to be going up to this new price of $74 plus GST. So if you want to get a below cost price ticket to the event, highly recommend you click that button and get yourself a ticket now. There's a limited amount, so do get in fast if you want to save yourself a few dollars. And we've just announced our Melbourne venue, State Library of Victoria. It's going to be at the Village Roadshow Theatrette and Conversation Quarter. So that is an amazing venue. I think everyone's going to really enjoy it. Coming from Sydney, I'm actually super jealous of Melbourne and all of their awesome conference venues. Although Wesley Conference Centre is spectacular. So I think we're going to have an amazing day there as well on Tuesday, the 5th of October. So yeah, get along. I really wanted to do a massive shout out to our sponsors. We've got a couple more sponsors joining us shortly, but Snowflake, Fivetran, Databricks, Imply, Versor, DBT, Yao Conferences, and Cloud Shuttle. Thanks so much to these sponsors. These are the sponsors that are actually making this event possible and keeping our ticket prices so low. So massive round of applause to you know, all of you. You are amazing. So thanks once again. But without further ado, I will invite Benny to the stream. Hopefully he's got his microphone and camera turned on. Yes, he does. And I'm going to add his awesome slides. Azure Purview sounds amazing. I will let you take it away, Benny.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, guys. Thanks for taking the time to join this session. My name is Benny Austin. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. I specialize in the data and AI platform, specifically on the PaaS services. And today I'm glad to introduce Microsoft Purview to this group. Azure Purview is to do mainly with data governance. It's Microsoft's PaaS service for data governance built around the Apache Atlas APIs. It is targeted mainly at the data office, the people who do the data governance, the people who implement the data rules, and how they implement that across the data assets. Now, let me go back to my demo. I've been in the consulting industry for a long time, and every time when we build a data platform, the question that frequently comes up is what next? So now that I have my massive data platform, I have onboarded all the different source systems. How do I know what is there in my data platform? And this is where Azure Purview comes in. So Purview helps you to discover not just your data assets, but the contents of it, like to say how many of your systems have sensitive data and what kind of sensitive data they are, whether it's a credit card information or personally identifying information, and how much of this relates to your business glossary, and what is the journey that the data has taken from the data source and how it was transformed and how it ends up in a dashboard or in a report. And that's the premises around the Azure Purview. So in the preview state, like we are just focusing on the very foundations of a data governance tool, which is pretty much mapping out your data assets, classifying your assets, adding business terminology to it, tagging your assets with some sensitive labels, identifying the data lineage, and so on and so forth. In a future roadmap, so there is plans for like kicking off workflows based on the privacy scenarios as well, and this will differentiate the product big time. And under the hood, like the Azure Purview has something called as a data map. A data map is just a metadata of all your data sources and how often they get. It's basically a knowledge map of your data sources. From the data map, you do a scan of your data sources and you get this, build this database called a data catalog. Behind the scenes, it's a graph database. And all your queries are based on your data catalog. So we have built some insight tools, which is a set of reports that can work on your data set, on your data catalog. And your data catalog is it can be queried by using REST APIs as well. So whatever I'm going to do a demo today, I'm going to use the UI that comes out of the Azure Purview, but pretty much all those operations can be done with the REST APIs as well, the Atlas REST APIs. And with the Azure Purview, we kind of recognize that your data platform is not just residing on the Azure cloud. It could be on your on-prem, or it could be on multi-cloud as well. Like it could be your AWS S3 buckets, or your GCP cloud storage, or your GCP BigQuery database. We do scan all those data assets and build this data catalog on top of that. So this is how the platform stands at the moment. So the key element of this is the data catalog, and at this point, probably I should mention, like Microsoft in the past has another service called as a data catalog, which kind of does similar to what Purview does, but Purview does more than what data catalog does, and it's built on an entirely different platform. So while data catalog is supported by Microsoft at the moment, the roadmap going forward is any new data governance projects, we recommend to use Azure Purview. The only reason, because it's built on an open source Atlas platform, which also helps our ISVs to build their products on top of that, so that they can complement with Azure Purview as well. Because in the past, you've had like vendors building up their own MDM solutions or bits and pieces of this governance solution as a different solution, which means a different kind of training required to use those products, and like which are kind of isolated from each other. So having a common platform helps you to complement Purview with what the ISVs have to offer as well. Now, with that, I'll quickly switch back to instance. Hope you can see my screen. Yeah, cool. So when you provision Purview just like any other resource on the Azure Marketplace. So just to save time, I provisioned an instance here. Now, usually the best practice when you're doing it on prod, just like as man mentioned in the previous demonstration, it's good to provision all these as infrastructure as code. There are ARM templates available to provision the service, so feel free to do that. When you provision, it's just like any other Azure resource. The only difference you will probably see is with Purview, we have added few RBAC roles, which is basically Purview data reader, which gives you the ability to read the data catalog, which is kind of different from the reader permission that comes with Azure. The reader permission helps you read the metadata of the resource, but the Purview data reader will help you, gives you access to read the data catalog. And if you need to modify anything on the data catalog, you need to have the Purview data curator permission. And if you are like a data steward, where you need to add new data sources into the Purview for scanning, you will need a Purview data source administrator. So those are the three RBAC roles. And the primary point of interface with Purview is Purview Studio. So I'll just click on that. So with Purview, this is meant for like the data office or the data stewards, the data analysts. It's more for those kind of roles. So you will have a search screen which says like how many assets you have actually scanned into Purview at the top. But we'll probably start off with the data map thing, which is where most of the data stewards will start their journey. So over here, like you can see, like I have a lot of different assets in my Azure subscription. And I have kind of classified into different collections at the top. A collection is just like a container, all right? It can be, in this instance, I kind of classified into the type of resources, but you can have it in any other way. You could have by your org structure, or you could have a projects, and anything works, and it does supports hierarchy as well, the collections. So under the collections, you would add your, basically you would register your data sources. So at the moment, like when you go to registering data sources, you would see a big list of data sources, which is not just Azure, but you'll have like the AWS as well. And you could add your Power BI, your on-prem databases as well, like Oracle or even SQL Server. So let me quickly say I'm going to add like a Gen 2 data lake. So I can add it to any of the data lakes, for example. And when I register this one, it gets added to one of these collections below. So once it gets added in, so this is the data map. This is just a metadata of where your data assets are. So at this point, we haven't done, at this point, Purview doesn't know anything about your data source. So for Purview to collect information about your data source, you need to set up a scan. And in this instance, I'm going to scan using a managed identity of Purview. So just before this exercise, I have given pretty much all my resources access to the managed identity to scan the resources. For example, if I'm going to scan data lake storage, or I'll probably need to give the managed identity, the blob reader permissions to scan it. And if I'm going to scan a database, for example, I need to add the DB reader role to it. So once I set up a scan, and you can see like it'll go through your scan, and it'll find out how many assets it has discovered, and it will also classify the assets. So once the scan is done, so now your data catalog is pretty much searchable. So just and this is where like say your data analyst, or you could pretty much search for by any keyword or by any asset type or by any classification. So let me show you an example of what classification is. So let's find out like what are the assets that has been classified with a credit card number. For example, this one is it's a blob storage. So there are a few tags that Purview attaches to the data sets. One is the what we call it as the system generated tags, which is just the name of the resource, when it was created, when it was updated, and all the other information. Then it looks at the schema of your file or your database or your NoSQL or whatever your data source is, and it'll get a schema of your data assets. Then it'll attach the classifications based on it. So the classifications these are the system defined classifications that are available by default. I should probably show you the So when I define a scan, I'll be saying which container I'm choosing. So if I choose the root container, like it'll continue, it'll add anything that it'll add pretty much everything under the root folder into the scan, and even after like you create new folders underneath that. And then it comes with some system default classification rules. So what that means is by default, like out of the box at the moment, Azure at the moment it gives like over 200 classifications, and these classifications are based on the GDPR PII draft basically. So pretty much all these standard identifiers, IP addresses, the latitude, longitude, and commonly available information is will be scanned for you at default. And in addition to this, you could create your own custom classifiers, which you have done, and which most organizations would do. A custom classifier is something like your transaction ID, or which might be having a specific regex expression associated to it. So that's when you set up a scan, and so when you set up a scan, Purview goes through all your resources, figures out, finds out this, finds the schema, finds what's the classifications that it can find, and then it also allows you to edit some of these things. For example, if you want to, if say something has been incorrectly identified, or if you want to add like a data owner to this asset, this is a place where you'll go and add someone from your AD group into this one. So if there is any questions around this data set, like you know who to contact this person. So once you do a manual change to any of these attributes, the future scanning will not overwrite what you have updated manually. So that's one of the features that you need to know about. So scanning is the fundamental operation that you would do, and you can have like a scan run on schedules. You can have scan run one-off, but we recommend having like for sources like data lake or databases, we recommend at least a weekly scan. Now, the scanning will also detect changes in your schema of your database, and it will update that as well. One of the other key things, and I just switch back to my presentation for a minute. One of the key integrations that we have with Azure is also it integrates your sensitivity labels that you have defined in Microsoft 365 into your data assets. For example, in your M365 tenant allows you to define sensitivity labels that is relevant to your organization, and depending upon how your data is classified. For example, it allows you to define your rules in M365 to say, if my data has, say, one classification of location and another classification of, say, for example, an email ID, I would consider that data set as a very high sensitive data set. I can define rules like that in M365, and when your scanning happens, those sensitivity labels get attached to your data sets as well. So at the moment, this feature is supported on Azure Data Lake and Azure Blob Storage, all the Azure storage services, and all the Azure databases like SQL, Managed Instance, Synapse. So you could define, you could either you could use your existing sensitivity labels that your organization has already defined, or you could create a new sensitivity labels, and it gets applied to your data sets when they are scanned and using these auto labeling rules. So that's something of a cool feature that you could do. Now, the other important aspect of any data governance tool is the lineage. So lineage helps you to you understand like what is the path your data has taken from the time you extracted it from the source system to how it ended up in a report. Right at the moment, like lineage is supported on Data Factory, Data Share, and Power BI. Like if you're using Power BI, like you would know, like Azure already supports data map in Power BI. So with the Data Factory, like we kind of integrated that feature into the Azure Purview as well. And Azure Data Share is another PaaS service that helps to share files between a B2B file share. It's basically, so it helps you to say if you have a vendor relationship and they're on Azure as well, you could use a data share to transfer files across both of your tenancies, and it will help you to, you could get updates to the files, you could get like incremental updates to the files and all those things, and it's all workflow controlled, and it's all audited, and it's all tracked. So once you get a data like that, once you have set up a file share, you could get the data lineage out of that as well. Now with lineage, you don't need, the lineage happens when that event actually gets triggered. For example, with the so in this case, like I think I have a data share. I do have a data share from my private account into my Microsoft account. So what I've done here is like I've transferred a file from, say, my domain into my Microsoft internal account, and transfer the file, and it kind of tracks the lineage to say how that particular file has originated. And the way you configure lineage is you go to Purview, and on the management tab, you can add your data shares that you want lineage tracked to. And similarly, you can add your data factories into this as well. So pretty much like I've kind of added a few different data factories that I'm using into the lineage. So what happens is, for example, if I go to So once you have configured your data factory or data share or Power BI to track lineage in Purview, all it takes is an execution of the pipeline to create a lineage. So in this case, I've linked this data factory to Purview, and every time I run this one, the lineage gets stored in here. So let me go to the assets, data factory. So every time I run that pipeline, the lineage gets updated, and you could even like see what's the source columns and how they translated into the target columns. And this is another view of it. For example, this is a balance sheet which is sitting on a storage, and it kind of tells like how this balance sheet was generated. So it says like, okay, source data was a particular CSV file was acted upon by this pipeline to produce this outcome. So if you can imagine, so like Purview tracks the lineage from the point the data enters your system, like if you're using shares or a data share or things like that. And then when you use a data factory, which is your primary orchestration tool, everything that it goes through is the lineage is tracked over there. And once the data set is available for reporting, the Power BI integration also means like you could see like where how the data flow ends up in how the data flow ends up in a report. For example, over here, like this is the lineage from a Power BI perspective. It kind of says, okay, so there's a public holiday report which is coming off this public holiday data set, but in turn this one is built of some data flows which are coming from a couple of different files of 2020 and 2021, which in turn has originated from a database. So it pretty much gives you the full lineage of from source to destination. So at the moment, like in public preview, like we're kind of supporting these three Azure services, but there is a roadmap to support Databricks in the near future, and also the what's it? Machine learning, Azure machine learning workspaces as well. So you can see like more of these services added to the lineage in the future. Let me move on. The other okay, so so far we've seen like classification. So the classification is based, the data classification is based on the semantics of the data, how the data, based on the patterns in the data, is what determines whether a data is a credit card entry or is a driver's license or is a date of birth. But we also find like there are some, the data needs to be tagged with some business terminology that you will not be available in from the data patterns, and this is where the glossary comes into play. So glossary is for the business to define the terminology and tag those data assets with those terms that helps them to search where those data assets are. For example, if we are in the accounts, if you want to know where the account payable tables are in your system, that's where you define a glossary called account payable and you tag those resources within the system. So the way you do that in Purview is you have this glossary view. You could define a new term. So when you define a new term, you can define your own system template or a custom one. Let me see. You can, when you define these, like you could define like each item at one by one, and the default template gives you like what's the terminology that you're adding, what's the definition, if is there a hierarchy to it, and who is the owner of this terminology. So you could either do that, but I do find like there is this template that is available that helps you to import everything, that helps you to import so at the moment this is an Excel template, so it kind of comes out in this format. So you can define, like, say for example, in this case I'm trying to create an accounting hierarchy, so I'll create the accounts as my top level hierarchy with no parent, and then I'll create within there, underneath that I can create something like accounts payable and accounts receivable, just separated with the underscore, and I can give the corresponding parents, and like I can create this hierarchy underneath that. So once I import this file into Purview, it'll create a hierarchy like this, and it'll tell me who the owners are and whether it's in a draft state or in an approved state. You could initially, when you create that, it'll be in a draft state, then it'll probably once you have the confirmation from your business team, like it moves into a confirmed state. And once you have this hierarchy or your glossary in place, you could go to your catalog and say, for example, pick up any accounts table. For example, I could search Meetup, say for example this one. I could go edit and say the glossary items to accounts payable, and I can tag those items there. So once I've added those glossary items into there, and if I search for accounts payable, I'll probably get all the resources that were tagged with the accounts payable tag with that. So that's it's a very key feature for business users. Now with the Purview also comes up with the Purview also comes up with the insights module. So insights is just like how you had the search over search. This is another way of searching these catalogs in a report way, or report or dashboard, like with whatever feels comfortable. So that's the other aspect to it. So it's kind of self-explanatory. So you got like different reports based on your catalog. And there's another feature that will probably help the developers is the integration of Synapse with integration of Purview with Synapse. So sorry, let me go back to my. So the Synapse integration means like if you have a Synapse workspace and you could link your Purview instance into your Synapse, and that's called like embedding. So once you embed your Purview account into Synapse, what happens is like if you're a developer and you've been tasked with to build something out of say you want to redact all the email IDs in all the tables and you don't know where those where those tables are, you will see a search item here. You could just that links back to your Purview database, and then you could pretty much from there build your you could build your link services or data sets, or you could start building your pipelines from what you have there. So it kind of links that information both ways into the Synapse workspace as well. So I think we're coming to, in terms of time, we are probably into it. So far, what I've kind of demonstrated to you is like the fundamental or the foundation features of this service that we're going to roll out in the second half of this year. So there are lots of new features planned in the future. Things like master data management, where we are working with Prophecy to have that integration going, data quality across all the data store, all the assets, and then expanding the capability of the connectors to scan to a lot of different scanners. And some of the quite interesting features are going to come around the privacy lifecycle management and around that. So some of these features are already in private preview, and if you like to join a private preview, just let me know, and there's some forms to go through, and like it can put you in this process. And with that, I'll end my session and happy to take any questions.
Yes, I think I mean, if we get any questions through on the stream, I will definitely pop them up. I think that was a fascinating talk. I think we definitely got a solid run through of Azure Purview. It's interesting that like it looks like there's a very solid story there in terms of data lineage. Going all the way from visualization all the way down through data pipelines to these source databases and data lakes and things like that. So that's really cool. Um, and all of the like the glossaries and things like that. So I think that was a really good topic. I think on some of the data lineage presentations, because we've had a few on Amundsen and a few others, people are still getting their heads around them. So we're sort of we don't get a quite a few questions coming through all the time, but we just did get one right now, so I'll pull it up on screen. Shrikant, hopefully I've pronounced your name well enough. When's Purview going to go GA, Benny?
Yeah, we're planning to go in the second half of this year, so it could be anytime soon. We don't have a definitive date, but it will be sometime in the second half of this year.
Are you finding, what sort of feedback are you getting from customers that are doing the preview at the moment? I'm sure, you want to be quite positive about it, but is there anything of interest that's sort of coming out of the fact that, I guess, these tools, they're trying to solve this problem of, oh, I've got, all this data from all these different sources, and now nobody knows where to find anything, and I've got all of these visualizations and I don't know what sort of data is underpinning them, or even if I can trust it and stuff like that. But are there any other use cases that you're seeing that are coming off the back of these sorts of tools like Purview?
Yeah, one of the key things is also what we're doing is once the data catalog is built, we want to do the policy management and kick off workflows based on that. And this is mostly around privacy and also data protection, with especially with all the regulatory things. For example, it could be a very simple thing like you might have a archival policy of storing the data for the last 8 years or something like that, but have you ever validated that whether that's happening? So with Purview, like once you have your data in the catalog, you can set up a rule for that and do a quick check across your assets to say, okay, do you have any data that's more than 8 years which I haven't archived or got rid of, and things like that. So the workflow capability is something we are going to bring in very soon based on the policies that we have defined, and mostly around also like some of the workflow could be triggered based on the sensitive data as well. So if it's a highly confidential data, just check if it's redacted. If not, do something about it. We could even kick off some functions or something to do that. So the next phase of it, which will be based off the catalog, but more proactive kind of enforcement of the policies and things like that.
So a bit like an Immuta style capability, if you've heard of that startup. That sounds pretty cool. So awesome. Thanks so much, Benny. My kids are starting to nearly burn down the house, so I better wrap things up pretty soon. But I just before we go, thanks once again, Benny. I just wanted to lastly finish up with a round of applause to all of our committee members and organisers for DataEng Bytes. We've got Rowan DePellier, who's the engineering manager at of the data platform at Atlassian, Jess Flanagan, who's head of engineering at Decard Technologies, Ingrid Anzola, head of data platform at ShipIt, Nitish Matthew, global head of data engineering at Afterpay, Francisco Liwa, he's senior data engineer, Aditya Bhatt, data engineer at OpenPay, Claudia Silva Cabrera, data engineer at Kinesso, Rafael Mello, he's the data engineer at Culture Amp, data engineering manager Noel Hansons at Lifeblood, Helen Anderson, digital product analyst at Kiwi Bank, Leo Hoare, data engineer at iTalk, Simon Aubrey, where did I go? Simon Aubrey, principal data engineer at ThoughtWorks. Lastly, Kelly Hotter at sales at Fishtown Analytics, makers of DBT. So we've got a really super talented team. They've done extremely well putting this data engineering conference together. So really excited about it. It's going to be the start of October. Should be a huge amount of fun. Another round of applause to all of our wonderful speakers tonight, and we will see you at the next meetup. Thanks. Ciao for now. Bye.